Hey guys, I'm Ubiru and welcome back to World of Warships. Today we'll be looking at the Tier 2 Japanese battleship, the Mikasa. The Mikasa in World of Warships is unique in being the lowest tiered battleship in the game so far. The Mikasa is the only Tier 2 battleship in the game. The Mikasa is actually a very formidable ship. It is very small. It doesn't go to a very good top speed, but it does have good guns, and it can be quite effective when it gets premium matchmaking. When I say premium matchmaking, it means preferential matchmaking, where the ship would usually get its tier or its tier below. So this thing quite consistently gets tier 2 games. I played a few games in this ship, and despite it having preferential matchmaking, you do sometimes get the odd tier 3 match, where you're up against Kawachis and South Carolinas. And the South Carolinas and Kawachis in the game, they're usually the best ship of their tier, much better than the cruisers and the destroyers. The Mikasa can stand up to those ships, but the Mikasa has the disadvantage of having fewer guns. It's very slow. It's the slowest battleship in the game so far, but it does have quite a lot of armour. So the Mikasa, as you can see, first off, it's a very small ship. Now to compare, I will show you the Otago, and the Otago is renowned for being a very big ship, and the Mikasa is nearly half the size. So the Mikasa has the advantage of avoiding torpedoes and shots from long distance. So let's get to the main stats of the Mikasa, the Tier 2 Japanese battleship. So first things first, this ship has 31,200 health, which is the highest so far of any Tier 2 ship in the game. It being the only Tier 2 battleship means that it will have quite a lot of health anyway. In comparison to the Tier 3 equivalents, it has more health than the South Carolina, but about 10,000 less health than the Kawachi. Unfortunately, they removed the armor specifics from the game in closed beta, so for the moment you can't see how much armor this thing has, but it does shrug off shells quite easily, so I would say this has a fairly good armor rating. So this ship has a score of 34 for survivability. The next stat is artillery firepower, and this thing unfortunately only has 2 turrets with 4 guns in total, so the artillery firepower is only limited to 33 out of 100. Now these guns go to a maximum range of 9.5 kilometers, which at tier 2 is very good. It has 2x2 305mm guns with a turning time of 40 seconds, a dispersion of 142 meters, which is quite good for a battleship, up to 5,100 damage with high explosive, with a 31% chance of fire, and 7,700 damage with armor piercing. This thing also has an amazing secondary armament for its tier. It has 18x1 76.2mm guns and 14x1 152mm guns. So this thing, even if you don't get those guns off, even if you're waiting for that standard 30 seconds for your main guns to reload, you can rely upon safely for your secondary guns to effectively kill targets near you. Now, because your gun range is only limited to 9.5 kilometers, you will be very close to enemies almost all the time. The secondary guns have a firing range of 3 kilometers, and you will very regularly be within 3 kilometers. So the secondary guns of the ship, in my opinion, is the highlight. The next stat is maneuverability, and this ship is very small. It doesn't have a very good engine, and it just turns like the very early pre-Dreadnoughts in the game. It's not very good in terms of maneuverability, only 17 out of 100. It has a maximum speed of 18.3, and usually this thing levels off at around 17.5. It does take some time to get to that maximum speed. This thing is not a runaway ship. This ship is definitely a brawling ship. You don't have very good speed to get away, so the best thing you can do is utilize your armor and fairly good secondary guns and fairly good main armament to put holes and destroy enemies. A highlight about the maneuverability of this ship, though, is the turning circle radius of only 450 meters. Now, that is quite good, but when you start turning, this thing, because of its very poor top speed, you do shrug off speed incredibly quickly. I've done a full turn left or full turn right, and your speed almost halves. You're doing that at 9 knots in speed, which in this game, you're basically sitting ducks. The Mikasa also has a rudder shift time of 13.3 seconds, which is quite respectable, but overall, the maneuverability of the Mikasa is quite bad. Now, the 17 score mainly reflects the top speed. The turning circle radius is okay, and the shift time as well, but the speed, you're not going to go anywhere very fast in this ship. And unfortunately, there is no way of upgrading this ship because it is a premium ship. You will never get in a game where you're against carriers. Now, carriers are tier 4 and above. You will never get into tier 4 games unless you platoon up with someone of a tier 3 or tier 4 class. So that is a highlight of the ship in that you don't have to worry about planes. If this thing got caught up with several dive bombers or torpedo bombers, this thing will be dead very, very quickly. And the last stat is Concealment, and Concealment for this ship, surprisingly, is quite good. It is a very small ship, and it has a 61 out of 100 score, a surface spotting range of 11.5 kilometers, and an air spotting range of 7 kilometers. Now, the air spotting range is almost irrelevant, but you do sometimes get those spotting planes and those trailing planes which can spot you. So 7 kilometers is quite good, and 11.5 is very good. Now, being a premium ship, the Mikasa doesn't have any upgrades except for this one credit bot upgrade where you can choose either a secondary battery modification 1, which increases your secondary gun survivability, which in my opinion is the one to go for. Your secondary guns will do a lot of damage, set targets on fire. Your main guns are quite effective as well. For me, the main armament really in this ship, the main firepower is with those secondary guns, and with this mod you will keep them alive for longer. The second one is the main battery modification 1, which is minus 20% to the chance of magazine detonation, minus 20% chance of the main guns being knocked out, and minus 20% to main battery repair time. Now, you only have 2 turrets consisting of 4 guns. Of these 2 upgrades, I would definitely go for this one here, the secondary battery modification 1. So unfortunately, there are no experience bought upgrades. This thing isn't a very fast ship, but it can be a quite good ship. When you get those situations where you're against the tier 2 cruisers or below, you can do quite well in this ship. But in those games with the tier 3, when you're against the South Carolina and the Kawachi, games can get very hard. Now, this ship is quite cheap. It only cost me around £5 on the store. I believe it's still there. But this thing can produce quite a lot of credits and experience. So despite this thing being not very fast, it can be quite effective at taking down the cruisers and arguably the destroyers. The destroyers from the earlier tiers tend to have not very good gun range, and they have very short range torpedoes. So your secondary guns can very easily rip through the destroyers of lower tiers. But you have to be very careful in this ship to avoid torpedoes. You have to think well in advance, otherwise you'll be sitting ducks with your top speed of only 18 knots. So let me show you guys a game in the Tier 2 Japanese battleship, the Mikasa. Okay, this is the Tier 2 Japanese battleship, the Mikasa, on Big Race Encounter Battle. So this game is a largely Tier 3 match, with a few Tier 2s. Unfortunately, this isn't the best matchmaking I've had in the Mikasa. I quite regularly get the Tier 2 matches, as opposed to these sort of games. This replay is to show you guys what you can do in the Mikasa, despite having bad matchmaking. So as you can see, we have 4 battleships on each team, 5 cruisers on their team, 6 on my team, and 3 destroyers on their team and 2 destroyers on my team. Now, the worst enemy of the Mikasa arguably is destroyers. Now, destroyers with their torpedoes, even in these low tiers, they have torpedo ranges of something like 6 kilometers or around 5 to 6. They can very easily kill the Mikasa because it has very poor maneuverability. In terms of armor, the Mikasa can stand up to the battleships, the Kawachis and the South Carolinas, but in terms of firepower, the main strength of the Mikasa's firepower is definitely its secondary armament guns, and they only go at standard with crew skills at 3 kilometers. So far on this map, I'm pushing towards the right flank of Big Race and doing some pot shots at the St. Louis. Now, the gun range of the Mikasa is 9.5 kilometers, with a gun reloading time, as standard of most battleships in the game, of around 30 seconds. Now, firing one salvo there, 3,300 damage. Now, the AP damage of these shells is 7,700, which doesn't seem too high in comparison to other battleships, but this is the first Tier 2 battleship available in World of Warships so far, so 7,700 is quite respectable, but the high explosive damage of around 5,000, you can arguably use high explosive more often than armor piercing, but for me, armor piercing, when you get a correct shot onto fairly armored targets like the St. Louis, targets that you can penetrate as opposed to go straight through, armor piercing is a good choice to use. Hit him there again for 3,300, quite good. He only has a small amount of health left. Shots going in, and we finished him off. Now the next target is the Shikumu, he's about 8 kilometers away. Now the Mikasa doesn't have too many consumables. Now most of the other battleships in the game have consumables like spotting planes and the like, but this ship has at standard the repairability and of course the damage control party. The Shikumu is very low. I'm thinking 9 seconds reload. I won't have enough time to attack the Shikumu before he's destroyed. There he is, and now they're capping. Now the really big problem with the Mikasa is, as you can see, I'm doing almost a full turn here with a fairly good circle turning radius. This thing loses speed incredibly quickly. Now this thing's maximum speed is around 18 knots, which is it's pathetic. You know, you're not going to get much slower than 18 knots in this game. The Mikasa is a very early battleship, and you can't purchase upgrades for this ship, so you would expect this ship to be very, very slow. So unfortunately, I have to make do with what I have and go to 18 knots maximum speed. And what I'm trying to do here is trying to push behind this island just in front of me and lay down some fire on the enemies to decap. Now my allies are mostly on my right. The enemy has rushed towards the flag and the small islands to the far western side of the map. And there are a couple of allies there, including destroyers, usually the location where destroyers hang out to very easily kill battleships. Now, at this point in the match, it's just started. It's only 5 minutes in, and we're already winning 5-2. But as you can see, most of their big ships still remain. They have 4 big tier 3 battleships, which are a struggle for me to kill in the Mikasa with my very poor guns. And they have a St. Louis and some Chesters. But we have 3 Kawachis, Mikasa, and a whole array of cruisers and 1 destroyer. So we have the big advantage here. They have to do something miraculous to get back in this situation. So the Chester is 9 kilometers, just within my gun range. Now the velocity of these guns is about average for a battleship, but the height of the guns when you fire them is, from what I've experienced, to be very, very excessive. So I fired 1 shot there into the Kawachi. Ricochet, no damage. We hit the Chester a second ago for 700 damage, which is a very low damage penetration. The Kawachi's here, 7 kilometers, and there's a whole array of enemy ships trying to cap the base. And my team have 2 ships in the cap circle, so they can't cap to try and win the match. So we're negating all their chances here to stop them capping and winning the game. So this is good for my team, but most of my team, having thrown themselves into the cap, are sacrificing themselves and laying themselves in front of the big battleships on the enemy team. So I hit the enemy ship there for about 1,000. Chester is reversing here. I'm not sure why he would do that. The Chester, is a fairly well-armoured cruiser, but doesn't manoeuvre particularly well. It is a tier 2 ship, and it's going to die very quickly. So I'm going to fire a couple of shots in there. 700 damage. Unlucky I didn't get a decent penetration there. I could have arguably used high explosive, but it's kind of hard to determine which has good armor and which doesn't, which can penetrate and which can't in these low games, because there are no armor specifics in the game anymore. You just have to sort of wing it. So I'm using armor piercing for the whole duration of this match, firing again into the Kawachi. Unfortunately, I just clashed with an ally. That does happen quite often in these early games, with people not being too experienced and sort of just throwing their ships around. Now in this ship I haven't really got a lot of opportunity to move around and avoid allies and get into good positions because of my very poor top speed. The Kawachi is now turning in to avoid some fire. I'm firing 1 salvo here. Shots going in to the very front of the ship for 2,500 damage. He's coming closer, but he's at a dodgy angle. Now I'm firing a 2nd salvo here. First one missed, 2nd shot went in for 2,500 again. Now at the moment I'm sort of idling my engine, not increasing speed. I'm in a good position from this Kawachi and other enemy ships. Now the allied St. Louis is throwing himself in front of the Kawachi, firing high explosive over and over again. Now we have 2 St. Louis on our team, an Albany and a Chikumu. Now the Albany is a very bad ship. The only ships really in our team to carry the game are the battleships or the St. Louis. Now the St. Louis, you can regard them as being, it's not a very good ship, they're very slow, they haven't got a very good top speed, but they have that gun firepower, and that gun firepower with the new boost high explosive damage can set targets on fire and kill them very quickly. So now I'm siding to this Kawachi. He's only got 18,000 health left, 2 shots going in there, 2,500 damage. Now that wasn't very good. 1 shot penetrated and 1 shot didn't. 2nd salvo going in, 1 just missed this side and 1 the other side of the ship. So unfortunately I missed there. South Carolina is behind that rock on the far right, so I can't finish him off. Another Kawachi in the distance there, out of distance at 9.4 kilometers. In this ship you have a gun range of 9.5, but when you get to 9.5, when you fire at that range, because of the average velocity is okay, but because of the firing arc, the chance of missing is very high. So there's South Carolina here, he's repairing, you can see his health going gradually up, 2,600 health left, missed the 1st salvo unfortunately, 2nd salvo going in, front of the ship for only 1,500. So unfortunately I did very minimum damage there. So the Kawachi is now turning towards me. South Carolina is very low. I have to wait a good 10-15 seconds left for my guns to reload. I'm the only one in the cap circle at the moment to negate the enemies from capping the point. So I am at quite a good health now, 26,000 health, which is quite good. They're not really aiming at me. So in this point I have the advantage of negating them capping, which is good for the team. Sitting here in a good position to lay some fire onto the enemy. So 1st salvo went in, 700 damage, 2nd one's missed by only a short margin. The accuracy of these guns isn't very good. Usually I tend to miss. Even when when you have a perfectly aimed shot, you fire and 1 hit, 1 miss, or it's all RNG based. So secondary guns are now in action. So he's within 3 kilometers, and the secondary guns on the Mikasa are the highlights. So we set him on fire there. Salvo went in, we hit him for a small amount as well. We set him on fire, we're on fire ourselves, and our engine's been knocked out. Gonna fire one more salvo into the side of the ship. 2,500 damage. But the St. Louis, who set him on fire, got the kill with fire damage. Now you will notice my engine is now knocked out. Now the engine of the Mikasa, I've noticed, is very susceptible to being knocked out. So unfortunately, when your engine is knocked out, you are limited to around 4 knot speed. Well, considering your max speed is 18 knots, you know, that's quite a lot worse, but it's just horrible really. When you have no engine running for about a minute, you're almost sitting ducks in the Mikasa, and when you get this sort of matchmaking with tier 3 ships with big guns, you will die very quickly. But fortunately for me, the enemy battleships aren't really focusing me down too much, and I only have one within my sights, and that's the Kawachi. Now I have repair in 2 seconds, going to repair this fire and repair the engine damage. My guns are ready in about 4 seconds, he's firing a salvo onto me. And as you can see there, engine critically damaged, and I'm immobilized again. So my engine, for the second time in a row, after just repairing, has been knocked out again. But fortunately for me, the damage control party was still up when I got damaged, so it negated the damage to my engine. So I fired another salvo there into the Kawachi, only did a minor amount of damage, but the Kawachi is repairing. So the Kawachi is now stacking up with this Carolina. I'm going to move outside the cap circle to try and get around and assist my allies. It's only 3 ships now versus 4 on their team. So the South Carolina is just sitting there. Here's his guns facing for the Kawachi. For my team, it's the Kawachi, the Mikasa, and the St. Louis left. Now, St. Louis is utilizing his good range, around 10 kilometers, and high explosive damage to kill enemies effectively. Now, I'm just going to do the broadside here onto this guy. 2 turrets firing. First one in, 700 damage. Second one in for 1,200 damage. Secondary guns are now firing at this guy. The St. Louis finished him off with some high explosive shells. So now that's 3 ships on 3 ships. So the St. Louis, very good for him. You can see here he got 4 kills so far, so he's doing very well for the team. Now the Mikasa is very good at soaking up damage, taking damage, fire damage, it doesn't really matter. Sitting there, guarding targets. It's a very well-armoured ship. If you get within range of your secondary guns, you can do a lot of damage to enemy ships. There's one ship in the distance just behind me there, the Chester, 600 health left. He's within gun range of the St. Louis. I'm going to try and push behind this island on my right, get behind there. By going into the cap circle now, I'm negating their effective capping, so they can't cap to win. There's only 6 minutes left of the game. Both the enemies must be behind the island on my right. I'm going to push forward as fast as I can, going 16 knots now, 18 knots maximum speed. So now I'm moving my guns around. So the back gun, they turn quite respectively, 40 seconds for 180 degrees, which is quite alright for a battleship. So I'm turning my guns around, preparing to get around this corner to fire a full salvo onto the South Carolina and the Kawachi there as well. So fortunately for my team, the St. Louis behind me did finish off that ship in the distance, so now it's just 3 on 2. So I'm getting my guns around, getting within secondary gun range as well, getting ready to turn full broadside onto these 2 ships, deciding which one to fire on, and hopefully do some good damage. So I'm lining up my shots. Here they are, there he is, the Kawachi and the South Carolina. The Kawachi has quite a lot of health, 8,000 health, and the South Carolina only has 3,000 health. So firing a full salvo, first one went in to the front of the ship. Unfortunately, the second one missed. I've just received an engine hit, so my engine's been knocked out, unfortunately, again, but it has been repaired. So the South Carolina is very low. We set one on fire with secondary guns, 3,000 health, he is trying to repair. The Kawachi as well. The South Carolina is sitting ducks. St. Louis behind me is shooting him over and over again with his very quick reload with his very powerful guns. There he is, one ship down. The Kawachi left, 4,800 health left. He's good position for guns. Firing first salvo, 1,200 damage. The St. Louis is firing again. My secondary guns are trying to kill this guy, but some of my secondary guns have been knocked out over the duration of this match. St. Louis shots going in again, and we finished him off. So in that game, in the Tier 2 Japanese Mikasa, I accumulated 65,000 credits, 1,600 experience, 585 free experience. I got the achievement for the first kill of the game, 31 hits, 1 destroyed, 3 set on fire, and I defended the base. In terms of team score, I came about halfway up the team, 749 free experience, and the St. Louis with 7 kills got on top. Now the thing about the Mikasa is because you're usually quite far away from enemies, people try and push you to their maximum ranges of around 8 to 9 kilometers. You have to fire your 2 turrets and wait. The waiting time is quite horrible in the Mikasa, and you're not really going to get too many kills. So in this game, as you can see, I didn't get too many kills, but I did get quite a lot of damage. So in this game, you can see here I got 34,000 damage with armor-piercing shots, and with fire set from secondary guns, I got 700 damage. Not to mention the secondary battery gun damage anyway of nearly 4,000 damage. Now if this is a tier 2 ship, this would be regarded as a quite good game in a tier 3 battleship, but being a tier 2 battleship where you're limited to 2 turrets, 4 guns, and in a game where you have largely bad matchmaking, I think I did quite well. The Mikasa isn't a very fast ship, and it's not going to get too many kills. If you work as a team and play quite defensively, you can accumulate quite a lot of damage. So this has been the Tier 2 Japanese battleship, the Mikasa. So the Mikasa is the first Tier 2 battleship available in this game, and in my opinion, it's quite good. It doesn't have very good maneuverability, it doesn't have very good overall main battery guns, but with those secondary guns, with the high survivability rate, and the good concealment, you can get some good scores in this ship. So my opinion is the Mikasa is worth your money. The Mikasa is only around £5 and it was on the store this week, so I'll leave a link in the description below. It's a fun ship to play when you get the correct matchmaking. So thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.